Today on Missed Opportunities, why in the world did Legion of Doom versus Demolition not happen at WrestleMania 7? I mean, come on. I mean, just to kind of go on some brief history, as always, you had Demolition come into the WWF around 1987. Immediately, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Kris. Immediately, when people saw Demolition, they thought, oh, or who are these Road Warrior ripoffs? I mean, to the point where a lot of people thought that their getup, their outfits were a lot similar to Mad Max 2, the Road Warrior. When you first saw Demolition, did you think, oh, who are these Road Warriors copycats?
Okay, so I was 11 years old at the time, and no, I didn't think that right away. I actually, the WWF WWE machine at the time was doing wonders, and when these guys were debuting, they right out of the gate were this like, whoa, head and shoulders above all the other tag teams, much more dominant. You were just waiting for them to like, well, they're going to win the tag titles. There is no way any team can compete against these guys. They were like this car accident that you could not look at, and you hated them because they were heels and all that, but they were so different for the WWF audience at that time. Now, as time went on, looking at the magazines, and I did watch NWA. We actually watched World Class. I had that as a kid too. So I saw other wrestling companies, and I did see the Road Warriors. I think as a kid, though, Demolition worked not as a copycat. But as years went on, even as a kid, you did remember that, oh, okay, I see that this is a copy. You were conscious about it, but it still worked. It wasn't like a la Renegade Ultimate Warrior. It still worked. It wasn't that bad of a contrast. You know, of course, we all know Renegade Ultimate Warrior. Awful. This definitely had legs to stand on in comparison to something like that. So you remember you had the WWF at its complete height at the time. A lot of WWF fans weren't even familiar with the NWA. But even though the ones that were, there were rumblings on the schoolyard. Yeah, I think who would win, the Road Warriors or Demolition? And as kids, we never really say like who copied who until we got a little bit older. And then at that point, when we realized that Demolition, because of the WWF, WWE promotional machine putting these guys over, it didn't matter at that point. These guys, we accept them. These guys, we're okay with that. They may have copied them, but we were so on board with Demolition at that point that it was okay. We never were going to get on board with the Renegade. You know what I mean? So Demolition worked. But like you said, when you fast forward in time to 1990, people became a little more wiser. My generation, we were getting a little older. And we were more exposed to NWA, WCW. So we knew not only, okay, it was a copy, but we accept Demolition. But then came the, oh my gosh, what if these two guys met? That when we talked about when we were little kids, looking at the Road Warriors in the magazines. When I remember I had the Wrestler magazine post WrestleMania 2 and Wrestle Rock 86, and it was the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering on the cover with the trophy and the check for $1 million. And I remember that cover for that magazine was like, wow, they were larger than life. They had a check for $1 million. They had this trophy, and they were like blood all over them, and they were just won this tournament. And almost the magazine was like reading a book versus watching a movie. Is that like suspension of disbelief, and you interpreting it maybe a little bit bigger than it even was, you know? So when you had that buildup of the Road Warriors coming into the WWF. Now remember though, before the Road Warriors came in, you did have a feud with the Powers of Pain and Demolition. So personally, I think that took a little bit away from the mystique of Road Warriors versus Demolition, because that would have been the first time you had these two powerhouse teams go at it. But the Powers of Pain, to me, kind of threw a little bit of a wrench in there inadvertently by maybe taking that mystique away a tad. because I'm not now as interested in these two big teams going at it, because I saw Demolition go against another big prominent team. But regardless of that, when they came in, absolutely. Unfortunately, Axe Edie got sick, and then Crush had to come in, so it was not the original Demolition. But in 1990, we accepted that. The WWF WWE machine was strong, and they promoted that Crush Smash thing to the point where we're still on board with Demolition. I don't think they needed to be turned heel even at that time, personally. But yeah, I think that was a total missed opportunity at WrestleMania 7. I was actually there. You were too, George. I don't know if you were as well, Adam, but I was there at the LA Sports Arena for WrestleMania 7. Or no, you weren't there, George, right? You did not go? Okay, yeah, our other friend did go. A couple of other friends went. Did you go, Adam, to WrestleMania 7?
So, man, where was I in '87?
No.
But
Did you go to WrestleMania 7?
oh, did I go to it?
Yeah.
No, I unfortunately I wasn't in LA yet. I was still in San Francisco. And I remember the first time going to the Tenderloin District in walking through the Tenderloin District in San Francisco, as a kid, and going by a sex shop, and I'm all like, oh, that's the Demolition outfit, and it was, definitely counterculture. But here's the thing. So one thing that a lot of people are forgetting, obviously the Road Warriors are great, right? But in terms of Demolition, all right, the pairing that we know of, obviously Barry Darsow as Axe and Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar as Smasher, or vice versa, something like that. Anywho, the fact that there was an original Smash in Randy Colley, who is one half of the Moondog Rex, who was already they had already won in '82 the WWF titles, right? So he came in as kind of this already decorated person, even though shaved head and unrecognizable, right? So obviously Cowley's out. They get Darsow in, right? And if this match would have happened at WrestleMania 7, this would have been incredible. Why? Because it would have basically solidified the history of one American Wrestling Association, the AWA, of Verne Gagne, obviously, because both Joe Laurinaitis, Mike Hegstrand, Road Warrior Hawk and Animal, respectively, and Barry Darsow were all trained by Verne Gagne. So Verne Gagne, Eddie Sharkey, but they were still of that Minnesota contingent that bore Rick Rude and what have you. So 3 out of the 4, of the 2 biggest tag teams, 3 out of the 4 members came from the same region, went to the same high school. That it's incredible, So to me, I think you get reunions of the ECW and packages of WCW, but another entity that the WWE obviously owns is AWA, and it bore Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Iron Sheik, Billy Robinson, who former UFC champion, Josh Barnett, and former NXT champion Shayna Baszler cite as their mentors, their senseis. So I think if this match were to happen, it would have solidified the lineage of the AWA.
So when you guys hear a rumbling that the Road Warriors are on their way to the WWF, are you guys kind of clamoring at the thought of this dream match? And it might actually happen, the biggest dream match outside of Hogan versus Flair, that the Road Warriors are probably going to go on to face Demolition sometime in the near future. Now, Hart Foundation and Demolition were already kind of booked for SummerSlam 90 for the Tag Team Championships, but outside of that, were you guys clamoring to see this dream match, this tag team dream match, Adam?
Absolutely. I mean, I had heard. I read of the Legion of Doom via their exploits, on the Aftermax, right? Pro Wrestling Illustrated and The Wrestler and what have you, and just seen pictures of them, and they were incredible. And I was in the AWA territory, kind of, because in San Francisco, the AWA ran, but I didn't get to experience that height of the Road Warriors in AWA. But I saw the pictures, right? I saw the pictures in the aftermags, and I was just like, my goodness, that is the only match that could have happened. I thought they were specifically bringing in the LOD, the Road Warriors, to come in and defeat the Demolition. A la what Vince McMahon did with obviously Hall and Nash and Hogan injecting blood, the cancer into the WWE. I thought that's who Jack Tunney had done to get that dark, dastardly Demolition, that he was bringing in the Road Warriors to basically combat them.
Now we did see a glimpse at this dream match at Survivor Series 1990, and what I think was kind of a cool match because you had Mr. Perfect and all three members of Demolition, Axe, Smash, and Crush against pretty much the Ultimate Warrior, the modern day Warrior, even though he was known as a Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, and the Road Warriors, which was now known as Legion of Doom. So we saw a little bit here, a little bit there, but not that kind of, I guess you can say, 2-on-2 dream match that we all wanted to see. Now, a lot of people may not remember, but there was a tag match between the Legion of Doom and Demolition. I want to say it might have been on Wrestling Challenge or one of those Coliseum home videos, because I know it's on the Road Warriors DVD that came out, and I want to say in 2005, that was produced by the WWF. But the real reason why we're here is to talk about, it's easy to say why this match didn't happen, but you have at WrestleMania 7, the Legion of Doom going up against an underrated team, in my opinion, Power and Glory, and you had Demolition face off against Tenryu and Katao. Why not have LOD against Demolition, and why not have Tenryu and Katao up against Power and Glory? Like, get that payoff, because on paper, I think it just would have made for a cool poster. Like, even like, let's say now that everything's kind of retro nowadays, I think I will totally pay big money for a big life-size poster of the match lineup of LOD going up against Demolition. What do you think, Adam?
So yes, absolutely. Now, in terms of booking it, right? Who goes over? Because I think that would have been the hardest thing for the booking committee at that time to kind of realize, because obviously Vince paid a top dollar for the Legion of Doom Road Warriors, and then you had his homegrown guys. And historically,
I do have a theory, but I'm going to wait till at the end, because at the same time, LOD beat Power and Glory, and Demolition lost anyways. Why not just have LOD go over Demolition?
Because that would have been admitting that one of your homegrown talents felt was second tier to anything that Ted Turner or anybody else could produce. And again, look at it historically. I mean, AJ is the only one that I can think of historically that has been a talent that has not been a WWE production and ascended to, one of the hired hands of Vince McMahon, right? But you look at Nakamura, you look at, in this current age, you look at Sting, there's a litany of guys and girls that you could think about, and Vince has always picked, the invasion angle, how come anybody couldn't go over there? Jindrak and O'Hare, even though they were green, Jindrak almost became a member of Evolution in place of Randy Orton. They went that way. So there's Vince historically will never see his product or anything that, even though he holds all the cards, he owns the AWA, ECW, WCW, Mid-South, or whatever, WWE will reign supreme over all of those.
Yeah, I think that's basically what it comes down to. There are a few exceptions throughout the years, like with a Ric Flair. I think even Lex Luger was an exception because Luger was something that, Vince was just into that, especially at the time, post WBF, the bodybuilder physique. And also when Luger came in as kind of like the typical conceited heel, as the narcissist, that was more for Vince's like, hey, look at this guy's got a big physique. But then when he turned him into the USA, at that point, I think in WWF and Vince's mind, it's like, I'm not even thinking about him being from this other product right now. This is my investment and my creation. You know, like Farouk, for example, these horrible gimmicks that they create. It's almost just whether the gimmick is good. It's just like, well, I got this guy, but I got to make him my own in order to put him over. And like I said, there's a few exceptions to the rules. Even Dusty Rhodes, to a point, was with the polka dots, but he made it work. You know, Vince even had to change him a little bit right there. So again, Ric Flair was kind of like the exception to the rule. I can't think of anybody other than him. They took the word Nature Boy away from him. If you kind of remember that, he was just Ric Flair. They didn't really refer to him as Nature Boy anymore. It was just on his robe. That was about it. But little things like that. So yeah, I think that was probably the main reason why we never saw that payoff match or LOD to go over on his major creation. And you touched on too, George, like I do too, call it a guilty pleasure, whatever. But when Power and Glory debuted, I was all about that team. And I just liked the fact that like this guy, Paul Roma, who was in a tag team, but then became a jobber, like, oh, and now he's going to be a guy that is a prominent place on the roster. I thought that was very interesting to put this kind of jobber yet glorified a little bit from his young stallion days. But jobber nonetheless team up with Hercules. Like he had a little bit of a resume to where we can accept that this jobber can do something. So that was always very interesting, even at the time. I remember seeing when they were, I know we're going off page here, but just this kind of ties into the tag team scene at the time. Whereas the whole way they formed, you know, because prior to Power and Glory, when they were fighting the Rockers, and then Paul Roma got squashed by Dino Bravo, and then the Rockers came to the ring, tried to revive Roma, and then Hercules came, and boom, the feud with the Rockers. But before that, I don't know if you guys remember, but like on episodes of Primetime Wrestling from like Maple Leaf Gardens, there'd be just these random matches of the face Hercules and team up with face Paul Roma, and they were tag teaming a little bit before nationally they kind of formed Power and Glory. So they were working on that, I guess, you know, at the time. But the tag team scene by the time WrestleMania 7 hit, there was a lot of transitions going on, because Power and Glory, if you remember, SummerSlam 90, they were put over big. You know, that was like the opening match, and boom, they were ready to hop on that rocket ship. And then you had guys, though, that came in. LOD came in. The Nasty Boys came in, which talking to, who was I talking to? Someone with WWF a long time ago saying that the Nasty Boys was really kind of the end for Power and Glory, because that was that new heel team that came in, and they were going to get the push. So Power and Glory that was right in the middle of their push. You know, Nasty's got signed and all that. So yeah, you're right. I think if the writing was on the wall for Power and Glory anyway by WrestleMania 7 time, why not have them job out to the Japanese team that they want to put over, and it would make sense. And of course, yes, have that match at WrestleMania 7 with Demolition and the Road Warriors. Now keep in mind, I always said that if Ric Flair got signed to the WWF a year before he did, let's say like around SummerSlam 90 or just before that, instead of 91, and they built at that point Hogan, Flair, like they would have had a decent shot at maybe filling up the LA Coliseum at that time, because people were talking always in the wrestling magazines about Hogan Flair. And then if you add that to a Demolition LOD card, like that would have been your dream WrestleMania for the purest wrestling fan out there, not just your WWF mainstream fan or your NWA only fan. You would have really brought those two worlds together. And again, we were a year prior to Flair coming in, so that sense of kayfabe and the want for a match like that was that much stronger a year earlier than when Flair came in. You know, you still have that innocence of Hogan Flair, the dream match. And I always thought that, like, wow, if they got Flair a year earlier, booked that to WrestleMania 7, everything would be changed. Everything would be different. And again, you add that to LOD, Demolition. What more can you say? It didn't even have to be for the titles either, necessarily.
That's a really good point. I mean, go ahead, Adam.
No, I agree 100%. But again, I think even how many years later, like close to 30, if not over 30 years later, we're kind of thinking about, in my head, I'm looking at like Tony Gurria, Vince McMahon, Pat Patterson, and whatever, and like knowing that you spent so much money on the Road Warriors to come in because they have been a draw every place that they had gone, Georgia, AWA, so they commanded a pretty penny, right? Japan. So obviously you want to build them, right? But you're not going to sacrifice something that you built with your own. I mean, look at the iterations of Demolition. We had, again, Collie, Bill Eadie, Barry Darso, and then Crush, right? So I wouldn't, and look at all talented workers, all championships in the WWF to their own respects, right? So I couldn't imagine obviously you want to put over the LOD, but you've got your homegrown guys that you've toiled and figured out and developed yourself. I couldn't cannibalize that for somebody new coming in, and especially Vince is very prideful in terms of what he's created versus even if he brought them over and he's signing the paychecks. If you're not a WWE homegrown guy or girl, it's a tough road to sow.
My conspiracy theory was going to be, do you think it was just Vince kind of not wanting his homegrown talent to look inferior? But you guys pretty much both think that was the case on why this didn't happen at another one of his babies, WrestleMania.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going off the track record, I mean, that's his track record. And if it's not putting a guy over from the other league on your guy, it's at least when you get the other guy, you're going to totally change his gimmick. And I think when he didn't change the gimmick, like a Ric Flair, like a Road Warriors, then he was a little more hesitant to put them over. But like Farouk Assad, for example, that's not Ron Simmons anymore. So I don't mind putting him over because my creation is now being put over, not WCW's Ron Simmons. So I think it would have been hard for him to put, again, LOD. They didn't change. They changed the name. They were known as the Legion, the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom in the NWA. So no, this was one of those exception things that you can't mess with. And I think he knew that with the Road Warriors. I think he knew that with Ric Flair, even to an extent, Dusty Rhodes. But that was pretty much it. Now, if you go back to my theory of like if let's say Flair came in, remember in SummerSlam 90 when Brother Love interviewed Sergeant Slaughter in the ring? Imagine like the lights go out, which they never did back then. And then like Brother Love as a special guest, and the lights come on, bam, Ric Flair is standing in the ring. And he did an a la John Cena Rock like almost a year before, just challenge you at WrestleMania. If that happened back then and Flair did that, and they would have had a shot again at selling out the Coliseum, not having to move it next door to the sports arena. But I think that if, let's say, for example, if that happened and Hogan went over at that same card, maybe then Vince wouldn't have had as much of an issue with LOD going over and against Demolition, because that's almost like a consolation because, well, Hogan already went over on Ric Flair. Maybe. But I think that there were, I understand contractually Flair couldn't come over until a year later, but that's just a fantasized missed opportunity to kind of capitalize on that era, the end of that era of wrestling in the 80s, but besides the Flair theory and thing, that definitely, looking back, he didn't think it so much at the time for whatever reason, because maybe it was already overspent. And it's kind of like Martel and Santana. Like by the time they fought each other in Rumble 92, 93, it was cool. But like, oh, okay, that's cool. But nah, I'm not interested that much anymore. And I think maybe that was a little bit of the feeling I had at WrestleMania 7. But like you said, looking back, now it's like, what the heck? Why the heck not? And the theory you had too, George, about you still had the Barbarian and the Coco for WrestleMania 6. So again, you could have had Power and Glory and against Tenryu and Kateo. No problem at WrestleMania 7. That would have made so much sense if Power and Glory is on the way down anyway. Just doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah. So
no, it doesn't. I agree. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Well-
unless it's again just like not wanting to go there and put these other guys over, and so in a way, if you think about this, it's a missed opportunity. We still talk about it to this day. But check this out: had that match happened, we probably wouldn't be having these. Hey man, who's better, Demolition or LOD? We probably wouldn't be having these conversations right now today if the payoff had already happened. So in a way, the silver lining for that match not happening is you still have your Demolition backers and your LOD backers doing their thing today, and having this conversation. Is it worth that to not have the payoff? I don't think so. I think we needed the payoff either way, though.
Well, that's pretty interesting because we're going to be talking about more things that should have happened in the future. I know we're going to be talking about Hogan versus Flair as why, even though I think they made the right decision at WrestleMania 8, but a lot of people didn't. But we're going to be talking about that very, very soon. But in the meantime, again, Kris Kloss, Extreme Memories, big hit.
Yeah.
Adam Woods, you got always interviewing people. So thank you both for joining me, taking the time out to join me today on Missed Opportunities.
Hey, it's Christy Olson. If you like this video as much as I did, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends so they can join in the wrestling chatter too. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow the show on Twitter at TW Chatter. See you next time.